And it's not easy stepping out of your comfort zone, and and it gets harder because as you step out of your comfort zone gets bigger, and it gets bigger and it gets bigger, and then the fears can become bigger. So at the end of the day, it's all about fighting your own fears. It's about finding the rationality of these fears, um, and also, you know, not ever stopping dreaming.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives, in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, I am chatting with a childhood friend. We've known each other for many years. We went to school together, and now we are here. We're going to be here chatting with you all. He'll be sharing some really interesting perspectives about stepping out of comfort zone in areas that have to do with work and career and just goals. So we have filmmaker and storyteller Joan Poggio here with us today. Hello, hello.
Hi, Kendra. Such a pleasure to be here with you.
Same. And we were chatting before we scheduled this interview as to what language we'd be talking in, we'd be speaking in. And that was one of the things that were like, okay, we are used to talking in like more like Spanglish mode in general. And so we're like, what should, but we both lived out of the country, out of Colombia for so long that um, I guess English is what you probably navigate the most now in your career as well, correct?
Yeah, so I live in Kenya. I've been here for 17 years, and my wife is English. She's British. And even though Swahili is the most common spoken language in Kenya, English is the lingua franca. So
Oh, okay.
I
So
speak English all the time. And even my kids, I try to speak Spanish, and I get more Spanish out of a wall than my own
oh yeah,
kids.
yeah, yeah. I am the same way here. And the thing is that I have no excuse because both my husband and I are both Colombian, so we speak Spanish to each other. Yet when our kids speak back to us, they respond in English. So it's yeah, I can understand and but I have less of an excuse because my spouse also speaks Spanish and yet our kids still respond in English. So I get it. All right. So let's talk about first off, okay, so you were born and raised in Colombia, and then what first off took you into studying film? And let's just kind of go that way. And then we'll just venture into the conversation about comfort zone and all the times you've had to kind of step out of that comfort zone in your own career and process. So take us back to your upbringing and how you left Colombia.
Well, it's quite interesting. I went to an American school in Cali. I actually studied with Kendra, and my father was the Spanish teacher there. And one of the perks he had was that his children would have an education in one of these top schools in the country. And I dreamt all my life of traveling outside Colombia. We say in Colombia, there's a saying: the poor want to be Mexicans, the middle class want to be Americans, and the rich want to be European. And so I wanted to go to the U.S. and have achieve the American dream. When I was 13 or 14, one of our classmates brought a video camera to school, and we started playing with it. And I really got into video. And teachers encouraged us to present rather than doing the typical board presentation to make little films. So I started making little films, and I made some money selling like class graduation, senior graduation, and I would go to my friends' schools and say, "Hey, I can make a video of your nativity play or whatever." Um, I then something happens in your life when you're in school, which I think happens to all of us, and it's that it castrates your creativity and it castrates your dreams.
Mm,
Or traditionally, I don't know if things may be changing, but the system is designed so that you go and be productive and look for a career. And coming from Colombia, the traditional careers, and in many places of the world, would be architecture, law, medicine, engineering, and um, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna get serious, and the closest thing I can do to filming is maybe advertising. And I went to
mhm,
study advertising, but that didn't work out. Then I moved on to. I then thought I started teaching English when I was 18 to make money and be independent from home. And then I thought, okay, I'll go to the best university in the country. And I studied general courses for one semester. And then I hated it because I studied with some of the richest kids in the country. I was already working as an English teacher and paying everything myself. And I would be late to a 4 hour designing class. I mean, 4 hours, and I would be late 15 minutes. And the teachers asked me, "Why are you always late?" I said, "Well, I apologize, but I work, I teach. And so I'm late because I just come from teaching a 1:30 lesson." And this teacher said, "Well, you either study or you work, but you can't do both."
hmm.
And that
That
really,
is just so
that,
different.
yeah.
Such a different perspective, especially even here, like, in the States, like, nowadays, like, that is not, like, at all what would be the status quo, you know what I mean? Like, people a lot of kids, work their way to be in school. So that's definitely very different what our upbringing was, or at least at that time period.
Well, it just speaks volumes of the class system in Colombia. So I was in an elite university, Los Andes, and then I just had a very pompous teacher who was like, you either work or study, to which I thought, I don't have to be here because I'm not going to put up with this kind of attitude, because I can't work and I can't just study or I can just work. I've got to do both because this is an expensive university. And then something happened, and it's that all along the way, I was not happy with my choice. And, uh, and,
Mhm.
and I thought, well, what do I really want to do? And, um, and I thought, well, I've always known. Oh, so there's an incident in this general courses. I was interested in psychology, and I went to the psychology class, and I was blown away because they were asking questions about Freud and blah blah blah. I don't know, and there were people raising their hands and they were talking about it, and I was thinking maybe I'm in the wrong class, but I wasn't. To which I realized, oh, okay, these people are passionate about psychology. I'm not, so
Mm.
I've got no idea what I'm doing here. So I thought and thought about it, and I finally decided to go to university and study film. Now, there were two film universities in Colombia. One was the public university, and the other one was this cheap university, which was back then not even a university. You graduated with a technological degree, which is 3.5 years rather than 5. And I thought hard and long about it, having gone through the experience of the University of these Los Andes, where I was also in classes with people that never read, never did their research, and so it became like a summary lesson rather than a discussion. And I was like, why? What am I doing here? Um, Getting a review or about
The
something
cliff
I've already
notes,
read.
the cliff
Yeah,
notes, the
yeah.
cliff notes rather than really the insights, like people having conversations about what they thought of what they read rather than just a summary of what they read.
So
Like,
I
right?
thought,
Like there was
yeah,
no yeah.
exactly. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to, it doesn't matter where I study, because whatever I'm missing, like whatever gaps I have in my education, I can fill them in with a good library. So I looked for, these two universities had a good library. but the difference was that the public university didn't have equipment. And back then, in 1996, when before digital video cameras, film was the golden standard. And I thought, okay, I want access to this film camera so that I can, you know, grow as a filmmaker here. And that's what I did. And then I had my big dream, which was going to the States, and something funny happened, and is that I graduated and I was in a relationship with my my girlfriend from Munich, 3 years and a half, and she was Colombian American, and she said, "Why don't we go to the States?" So we got married, and I thought, okay, we'll go to the States, and then that's my way in into the film industry. Now that didn't work out because she went ahead. I mean, we got married. We had been together for 3.5 years. We got married. We did the American Embassy paperwork, and then she went off ahead of me. And then she just was dazzled. She had an American passport because she had been born in Colombia, but she had never lived there.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
when she went there, it was just like, like the broad
Is it
daylight,
different?
Broadway
Mhm.
lights shining. Ah. So
Shiny objects, yeah.
I stayed behind, and I made a big mistake when I stayed behind, and is I thought I was too good to just get a local job in the
Mm.
film industry, and something happened, which
Can we
is
pause one sec?
yeah.
Do you mind if I pause you for a second? Um, okay, so I'm in this conversation. I'm curious. So we're at this part. I just want to make sure we put a little bookmark where we're at because I tend to do this. I tend to go back because I want to fill in these gaps. I'm curious, what were your parents' thoughts of you switching careers and studying film? Again, going back, we were talking before we even started recording about the aspect of like the titles that we get so attached to, and like and again, like, oh well, is a doctor this or doctor that, or or um what was the reaction of your parents when you decided to become a filmmaker and go into that route rather than the career you had started to do in advertising?
Well, luckily for me, I didn't quit one university but two. So by the third time I said I want to be a filmmaker, my dad was like, just get a degree. I don't care if you're a baker, a filmmaker, or whatever, but just get a degree. And so it
Yeah.
was not that hard.
Okay. So that was
But
that. Okay.
yeah,
I just was curious, but
to give credit to my father, he loves poetry. He was a Spanish teacher, and
Ah,
so he never had a problem with me studying film.
the arts.
My
Yeah,
brother,
the arts itself.
yeah,
Yeah.
my brother studied arts. So,
Hmm.
and my mom was very encouraging. And
That's
anyway,
awesome. Okay.
when I was in school,
Sorry to pause. Yeah.
I was making money filming and selling videos. So I had been independent for quite a while.
Okay.
But
So we bookmarked ad when you decided to submit, and then you felt like you were too good to just take a job
yeah, you
um
see, this is a
there.
huge problem, which is your ego.
Yeah. Yeah,
Your
that's yeah.
ego gets in the way all the time, and this was
Yeah.
like the first big block in my life, was thinking, I'm too good for this. I need to um, go to Hollywood and go to the U.S. Now, my father had been very insistent. Oh, you've got to meet Mauricio. He went to Harvard. He was from our school, Kendra, Mauricio Ramirez, Mauricio Ellis. And he went to Harvard. He was a top athlete in Colombia, and he studied film. And he was back in Colombia, and my father was, you got to go and meet Mauricio. But I remembered Mauricio. I think I'm 8 years younger than him, and so I remembered this guy, and I thought, but he's a geek, he's a nerd. It was like, how boring. Anyway, finally I went and I met Mauricio, and he showed me a bit of what he was doing, which was a documentary about condors and the paramo in Latin America.
Which is our el condor is a wait, no, is condor not is that our national bird
Yeah,
too, or is it just from yeah, it is our national
it
bird.
is.
Okay. Okay.
And it just blew my mind what I saw. I was I was so blown away, and I had never considered documentary ever. I wanted to make feature films, and so
Mm.
then I was very determined. I want to go. I want to work with this guy, and I had nothing to show him. So I went and um, I got a little project. I got involved in a little project where I could do camera work. Even did the acting, and it was like a tourism
Wait,
clips for Cundinamarca.
but you had done acting already we were in a play together, mister, so we had done acting already just
Yeah,
on
no,
a
but like
stage before.
this is like
This
me.
is on camera.
Operating the camera and acting and editing, and
Cool.
and I had very cheap tools, um, but I just worked really hard to make it look very polished. And he loved it. He said, "Oh, it just comes to show, it's not the tool, but what you do with it that matters." Um, Now, the other problem I had is that I had been working as an English teacher at Berlitz from the age of 18, and I was already 24. And at that stage, I had already dropped out of Berlitz as a teacher, but I had my private students, and I was making pretty good money in Colombia. And no one could match what I made working, 4 hours. I was working 4 hours a day. No one could match that salary, that income uh, in the film industry if I came as an apprentice. And that was very hard. But then
Mm.
um, when,
So, in that point, again, was it the ego again being attached to the component
no,
of the
a
financial gain, or
child,
what is of
well,
drawing you?
I had a rebound. So immediately
Okay.
after my wife um,
Yeah, that's true, right?
left the scene, I met this other girl, and 3 months later, she was pregnant. So, and I said, look, we can have the child, but and I was happy. I was like, great, I'm going to be a dad. But then and that was interesting because I thought about it and I realized if I didn't work for my dreams now, at that point or then, uh, it would be really hard to achieve them because a child is a major responsibility. So now you've got to educate him. And I just saw myself then trapped in time, perpetually being, a teacher and maybe ending up as a director of one of these institutes or a school. And that was not the path I wanted for myself. I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I had to make a real hard decision, and I thought, okay, I'm going to work as a filmmaker, start as an apprentice from the very bottom, and and keep on teaching English to supplement until it got to a point where my son was born, and I was doing 2, 3 jobs at the same time. So I would be teaching English during the day, and then I had what they called the horse shift because it was from 8 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was just editing, and I was
Mm.
barely sleeping. But one thing led to the other, and then finally I started working with this guy Mauricio, and we did a big documentary on the history of Latin American aviation for Discovery Latin America. But we were working for another production company. So he was an employee and I was an employee. And I had never in my life been so mistreated. It was awful. The producer of the whole company was just, I mean, incredible piece of work. And he basically a slaver. And then when we finished the project, we were very happy with what we did with the final project. We were offered a permanent position in the company where we would basically we would have to look for the stories, we would look for the funding, and then we would put the funding towards this project through this production company, and and that would be it, and they would keep all the glory, right? And so Mauricio
Mm.
turned around to me and said, he said, "Look, this we have this alternative, or I have some savings. I'll buy an editing machine. You and I find a place to rent. We open up an office and we do the same thing, but we don't have any backup. And this was he offered this to myself and another young guy who was like assistant production, and we said we rather eat our own poo poo than someone
Mhm.
else's.
Yeah. That right there was again like just standing up. I guess you had already experienced the working for somebody else's dream to some extent and being treated the way you did that it just gave you then that opportunity to already just decide that that's not what you were going to do. It's kind of I call this grief gratitude in the gray in between because in those hard moments is when you also are grateful for those because it shows you a different direction as to what to go because you've already experienced what was not what you wanted, right? So then it took you
Absolutely.
into the direction of of then creating your own dream. So how was that? How was it creating then something from scratch with these two other
It was
individuals? How was that?
phenomenal. It was phenomenal.
Love
The
it.
best thing ever. There was so much energy, and and the bet paid off. I think the first year and a half was a bit challenging. We got little projects, and we could live. I could have still been making more money. Okay, by that point, I had already dropped from teaching English. Maybe I had one or two lessons every now and then to supplement a little bit.
Mhm.
And then when we opened the office, um, my son was already a year old, and what we were doing was amazing in terms of work, but I was really struggling with money, and I had to downsize my flat. I had a really nice flat. I moved downtown, which was not like the best area, and then I couldn't go out. My friends would come visit sometimes, visiting from out of town. Let's go out, have some drinks, and I'd say, actually, do you mind we have a drink at home and you help me with some nappies?
Mhm.
So my friend subsidized, my son's
Nappies for
nappies and milk.
us. Well, that for us American, that would be diapers. Is
Diapers,
that
yeah,
right?
sorry.
N
Yeah, diapers,
Just
diapers.
making sure because you have the British government making sure. So so then so you had to like make some sacrifices, but at the same time, did you feel like you were missing out by making those sacrifices in your lifestyle, or did you not because of the reward that was coming from doing what you really loved?
I didn't feel I was missing out.
Uh-huh.
I always thought that was temporal. And I've always believed, like you have temporal setbacks. At the moment, it is hard, right? But you try everything. And I have to admit, at one point, I had schemes in my mind. At one point, I felt a lot of empathy for people that actually commit a crime in order to help their family, their children, because
Mhm.
I thought, Jesus, if I have no other alternative, I would happily rob someone, or I would commit a fraud. I don't know. And I just thought, wow,
Because you
yeah.
had a child and you knew,
And
yeah.
it was hard. I mean, it was hard. I was, I would walk to work for an hour and a half back and forth, um, because I had to save every penny. So I wouldn't spend a bus fare. And I'm not talking about a cab,
Wow.
I'm talking about a bus fare. And
And that was an
so,
hour and a half each way, although that would have
yeah,
almost taken you do you thi although in Bogota, where you lived at that time, correct? That would have probably taken you that amount of time even riding the bus with the traffic, or were you saving time aside from money by walking, or were you
no,
adding the
I
time
wasn't.
as well?
No, because
How long?
no, there's no
3
traffic at
times as long?
5:30
It's
in the
3 times
morning.
as long. Oh, yeah, so 3 so yeah, so then that was a sacrifice you were making there, even just walking just to save even on that
Yeah, but
end,
there was a
even just
good
the bus
purpose
fare.
behind it. There was a good purpose,
Mhm.
which is like your son, your child.
Yes,
But then,
yes.
we hit jackpot, and we got commissioned by Discovery to do um, a reality show with a Latin American Grammy awarded band with Basilos. And they said, look, we need to take Basilos in September. We were in May, uh, May 2004. We need to take them on a safari anywhere around the world, a trip, to see something related with wildlife and make a series of 4 episodes for Animal Planet Latin America. And we have $1 million budget. And this was like huge for us. It was like, this is what we opened this office for. This is it.
Mhm.
And we worked really hard because, time constraints. Now, Mauricio's dad used to hunt in Tanzania, and Mauricio hated it. And so he swore himself that he would do a photographic safari. Safari means in Swahili trip. So everyone thinks safari is hunting. Safari means
Mm.
a journey, a
Trip.
trip. Yeah.
Mm.
So he said we're gonna have a photographic safari, and we looked, and logistically speaking, it was better coming to Kenya than Tanzania because the distances in Tanzania you have to cover a much broader, and there were more things to do here in a tighter area, so it worked best for us. Now, something
This is what
incredible
year?
happened.
What year?
That's
What year is this when
2004.
you Okay, okay.
2004. Now, something incredible happened, and is that, um, you know, I would say I was very lucky, and there was magic in the air. And many years later, I came to understand that I had created that luck and that magic. And I'll say why. Because luck is the encounter of preparation and opportunity. If
Mhm.
I offer you right now, Kendra, like you can, uh, if I give you half a million, $500 million, and you open, a competition to Tesla, you wouldn't do it because you're not prepared. So when people come to me and they say, "Oh, you're so lucky, you get these amazing jobs," I say, "Well, if Netflix called you right now and offered you the same job I've been offered, would you be able to do it, knowing the skill sets you have?" Uh, Maybe not. So for
Mhm.
me, luck is I was prepared for that moment, and then the magic is stepping out of your comfort zone. When you're trapped in your comfort zone, you live on in Groundhog Day. Everything is the same. The minute you step out of your comfort zone, things are tough, but amazing things start happening, and that's the magic in life, I believe. So Mauricio said Joanne has to travel. I was going to be the editor of the series, and he turns around and tells Discovery, Joanne has got to come to Kenya with me um, as a camera assistant. And they turned around and they said, he's never traveled. He's never traveled. He doesn't have that experience. And he put his hands on fire for me and said, look, he's going to be the series editor. He's got to know what happened on the trip. And he's an amazing cameraman. And he'll be not only assisting us with the camera work, like with tapes and charging batteries, but he'll be doing camera work himself. And so I was very lucky that Mauricio believed in me because I had worked really hard in achieving this dream with him. Remember when he said we either stay with this job and we do the work for someone
Mhm.
else, or we come together and we do our own thing, and we suffer and we reap our own benefits. And he delivered with that promise.
Mhm.
And so I was absolutely broke, but this project changed things around. Then the money started coming in. I did go to Kenya, and then everything changed again.
Okay. So at this point, then how long was that trip to Kenya then for that particular project? And
it was
then,
it was a very short
yeah.
trip. Mauricio and I were all together a month here in Kenya because it was a
Okay.
reality show. So we basically, Basilos had only 2 weeks in their very busy and hectic schedule. And so uh, we came a week before, then the band appeared, and we filmed for 2 weeks, and then we stayed on for another week.
Okay.
Now,
And then what happened then from there? Then this is where you said everything
well,
changed. So
I
let's
have I have to do a little bracket there. Um,
Absolutely. I'm good with I'm the expert at brackets. Go ahead.
okay, open bracket. My
Okay.
relationship was not working with the mother of my son. It was
Mhm.
actually a very tumultuous relationship, and I was very, very um, I was lost. I didn't know what to
Mm.
do because I was not happy. I was absolutely miserable. Now you have to bear in mind that I was sacrificing like everything, like financially and personally, to make my career work. Now at the same time, I was sacrificing my emotional side uh, for for my child because I thought if I'm not with my, if I'm not in this relationship, then my son will suffer. So I
Mhm.
decided to um, put my emotions down and just live with it. Now, many years later, with a therapist, I learned that I've always been passive aggressive, and I just eat quietly, and I just start boiling up inside because I sacrifice myself for
Mm.
people or for uh,
To make the peace,
things.
to keep the peace around, but then inside you're just stuffing it just to
Yeah,
kind of not yeah, to ruffle any feathers, yet at the end of the day then at some point it has to come out in one way or another.
yeah.
So
Luckily,
in your
or
yeah.
as fate would have it, the mother of my son, a month, 2 months, or 3 months before I traveled, she said, "This relationship is not working." And I was
Okay.
like,
Now,
"Ah, yeah,
so how
I
was
know it's
that?
not."
Yeah. So
That
now
was a
with
bit confusing. That's a bit confusing because I
mm,
had always been a crutch for her. Um, I hope she's not listening to this. she,
well, you don't have we well
I was a crutch, an emotional crutch. She would say, without you, I can't live. That kind of, um,
mhm. Dependency, the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
dependency. Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
And so, anyway, she then turned around. I think she started working again, and then she met someone at work that, uh, you know, really was interested in her, and I think that made her think. And she came and she said, "This is not working." So we still
Mhm.
shared the same flat. It was amicable. But then when I traveled to Kenya, I mean, so I had never been on a transatlantic trip, and I came all the way from Bogota to Nairobi in business class, drinking champagne, stuffing myself up in the plane. I mean, it was amazing. And then my mind was blown away when I got to Amsterdam and I saw cops with, mohawks and earrings. I was like,
The
what?
culture the
Yeah,
culture shock, yeah.
culture shock. And then seeing Indians, Japanese, seeing the whole world, like,
Mm,
and everyone
yeah.
dressed up differently and skipple. I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is it. This is
Mm.
one of the dreams I had in the back of my mind for such a long time, and I was doing it. And I come to Kenya, and then I meet, uh, I mean, the woman of my life, and she's currently still my wife.
Samantha, no, Sam? Is that how Sam?
Yeah,
Is that what you call
Sam.
her, Sam? So
Sam.
Sam with
So
Sam then, do you met her during that trip? Do you met her during that then short trip for you guys were doing? So
yes,
how then how what do you was she part of the production? Was how
she
did you
was.
meet her? She was, okay.
So when we landed, we were doing a bit of pre-production with the people organizing our trip on the ground, and we realized like, oh wow, we don't have any women in our show. These are four guys,
Mm,
and our guide said like, oh, don't worry, we have this lovely lady. She's photogenic. She's got a witty sense of humor, and she'll be joining us. She's going to help with logistics, and I'm sure she'll be happy to be filmed. And every day he would say like, she's coming tonight, and then the following day she's coming tonight, then the following day she's coming tonight. To it, now I was
Wait,
intrigued. Who is
waiting
this
for
woman?
Godot, like
Yeah,
waiting for Godot.
who is
She's
this
like, wait.
woman? So when I met
Mm,
her, she actually came. She came the same day that the band arrived, and so I met her working. I was filming, and when I I could not stop pointing my camera at her. I have never been so unprofessional. I think I didn't film these guys the whole trip at all. I was just
So the
filming her.
documentary for Basilos is like Sam on camera for the whole
Yeah.
documentary.
Now, um, I believe that in life we cross celestial paths. Like there are doors
Mm,
when you go through life, opening and closing doors, and you go into long hallways or alleys of doors, and you say, "I'm going to try this door. I'm going to try," and and at the same time, other people are crossing those doors, and I've
mm,
realized, like all these years living here, for example, that I had been walking parallel to other people I have met here, and
mm.
that had been to Colombia on a holiday and blah 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 and whatever, and realized like, oh wow, if we had probably we crossed
It's
paths
crust.
in Colombia,
Yes.
and now we have a total relationship here. So Samantha
So
is one of
awesome.
those people. Um, and but she was very dismissive of me because I'm 9 years younger than her. So when I came, I was 27 or 26, 27, and she was already older than me. And the other Mexican cameraman was flirting with her. Luckily, he didn't speak English. She doesn't speak Spanish. But we had a fling, and then I came the day I was leaving, and I just got to Amsterdam, wrote her an email, and then I got to Colombia. She wrote me an email, and we had a long distance relationship for 3 months. She went to visit me to Colombia in December 2004, and then we had a great holiday. And she said, "Oh, this is not going to work because I'm not going to move here and learn Spanish. I had to learn Swahili." She had been in East Africa for 10 years. And then she's like, "You have a child." And I realized then, no, well, if I don't make things work, nothing's going to happen. And I said, "Look, I want to go to
Mhm.
Kenya." So I made the decision to come to Kenya. Um, yeah.
How was that? How was it making that decision of leaving your country? So here's one of these things of these stepping outside your comfort zone. So you stepped outside I'm going to kind of retrace a little bit here. So you've stepped outside your comfort zone in areas of work before. You stepped outside your comfort zone when you created, this company with Mauricio Vélez. You stepped outside your comfort zone when you traveled to Kenya, first time internationally, and now here again, you're stepping outside your comfort zone to leave your home, leave your child to then move again, not just to another country, just another continent. So, how was that transition and decision for you?
It's funny, but I made that decision uh, the day I had the fling with my wife, or the one
Yeah.
night stand, as you would call it in the U.S. Um,
Mhm.
I I I thought I could live here, um,
Mm.
and I didn't
Your
think
soul,
about.
your soul felt that was home.
I don't know, but something happened, and I just felt so comfortable there,
Mhm.
and I thought something deep inside of me said, "You don't have to go to the U.S." because that had always been my
Mhm.
dream. So I think it's very, when things become clear. I
Mhm.
think okay. I think in life you have long-term goals, mid-term, and short-term goals. And for example, I thought living in the U.S. was a long-term, like it was my main goal in life. And then I realized, like, nah, no, it's not. Um, and I thought the right thing is moving here. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll never find out unless I try it out. So I had no fear. And I did reserve that information to myself. I didn't tell anyone that already I was planning to go back to Kenya. And the funny
Mhm.
thing is, like, I had nothing here, right? I met this girl,
Mhm.
but it was a fling. Now, what happened is that we made it work, having a long distance relationship, and and then when I told everyone that I was coming here a month before actually coming here, everyone tried to dissuade me, and that I found
Mm.
that truly unbelievable. And I realized that they were projecting their own fears on me. So I would be told things like, "But you know, you've worked so hard, and now you had a very successful project with Discovery, and there's so many more that will come your way. You'll be," because I also did a little directing for Discovery parallel to this project. So I could have stayed on and made a career and keep this client. Then other people would say like, "Oh, but your family is here. That's so far away." And then other people would say, "Well, it's Kenya. Nairobi is Nairobi. Like, what are you going to do there?" And I said, "Well, I'll figure it out. But I could be an English teacher or a Spanish teacher. I don't know. I could do anything. It doesn't matter." But I was
Mhm.
confident. I thought, okay, hold on. I'm a good filmmaker. I'm learning. I'm growing. Now I've stepped out of my ego and I realized, okay, you don't know it all. You will
You
never
don't know what you
know it.
don't know.
You will never
Yeah.
know everything, and you keep growing.
Mhm.
Because I realize now, working with Mauricio, that yeah, it's just you just have to come to every project with a clean slate and willing
Mm.
to work and learn. So I came here. Luckily, I had left enough money for my child for 6 months. So I came again. Um, I came without a penny. I came with $300. I came with a rucksack, $300, and a little Mac Mini. And then luckily, Samantha said, "Well, you can live with me." Um, and then 3 days later, I had no money, and she said, "How much money did you bring?" It's $300. Now, $300 in Colombia can see you a long way, but not in Kenya. Um, so yeah, so I had to go out and look for work, network. Um, I would go out on a bicycle and go to Samantha's office, borrow the car, go and meet people. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. So then okay, so then how then did you start doing film there? And at what point and how long into your being in Kenya did you start kind of creating then what you now have? And we're going to step into now the present to kind of just jumping a few. You've had now since a daughter, um, right? You have your daughter now. So you want to kind of jump forward to the now, and then we just go into how your career shifted?
Sure. So okay. Um, so I'm
It's
involved in
hard, right?
many.
It's hard. It's so hard, especially as a storyteller, as we were just saying before. It's so hard to like jump into like wait, all these details
Oh
matter,
no,
everything in between.
I want to give it like a one-liner. So
Okay.
currently, I'm involved in different projects. Um, I'm a documentary filmmaker, but I call myself a filmmaker because although I started with documentary, I have filmed feature films. I do music videos. I do a lot of advertising, um, and other things. And I'm a cameraman. I'm an editor. I'm a director. I'm a producer.
How did
Um,
you establish that? How did you establish that by living there, being a foreigner in this country? Like, how did you end up creating? You see, I'm like now I'm here. I am like wanting now. I'm the one that wants to know the details. But how did you just? Did Samantha introduce you to people she knew, or did? How was it that you established what you now are there?
so everything here works word of mouth, but not
Hmm.
by someone coming and saying like, "Oh, you should hire my friend. He's a good filmmaker." It's reputation, and that reputation
Hmm.
you build by living up to your promises. So one of the big
Mm.
drawbacks here with people is that they'll promise you the sun and the moon. Yeah, if you say, "Can you deliver in a week?" Yes. Can you do it for $2,000? Yes. When the reality is it would be in 2 months and
A
it
month.
costs
Uh-huh.
$8,000. And
Mhm.
so, and I learned that very quickly when people would let me down. And then I would have conversations before hiring people and ask them how much. They would say X amount and how long, however many days. And I would always say, if you are telling me if you're giving this price and this time frame thinking, oh, this is what he wants to hear, so I'll get the job by telling him what he wants to hear, and then I'll just come up and start bloating the price and giving excuses, then what will happen is we'll finish the project 6 months down the line. We'll be sworn enemies. I'll never hire you again, and I'll tell the people around me not to hire you again. So, is that the price and is that the deadline? No. So, but I would keep my promises, and I was always in budget when I started. I started working filming interviews, and then the person that I did the interview with was very happy with the work we did. We did it on the spot. I edited on the spot, and then she said, well, would you be happy to work with me making like more of this? And I said, sure. And then this was for the International Livestock Research Institute. And it's one of 15 centers of research institutes um, of a conglomerate called the CGIR, Consortium of International Agricultural Research, blah, blah, blah. And we jumped from doing interviews to then filming a little story about trypanosomiasis in Ethiopia, to then going to Uganda, to then for 7 years I traveled to 24 African countries, to India, to the UK, and to the US with this kind of like agricultural scientific research stories, but focused around people. So again, something I like.
Stick back again to
I,
stories. Uh-huh.
I don't know, like I never dreamt, oh yeah, I want to do films for. I wanted to make Transformers and James Bond films, and there I am with farmers filming their stories, and it was amazing because I realized like my job was telling stories and to impact policy makers
Mm.
to twist their arm into you have to work with us, um, help us with these policies because the farmers need them. So scientists are very, scientific in their approach, and they would talk about the science and think like policymakers understand that. Policymakers don't care. They want to know how does this have an impact on the ground. So my job was going out to the field and finding real people, like underdog heroes, um, people that worked really hard and show them like you've got to help these guys because they're doing everything possible to uplift themselves. So it was showing like not charity but the worthiness of people. Like you
Yeah,
have to help people.
standing up for the little guy, for example, type of thing. That component of just standing up for those that may not be able to stand up for themselves completely. Is that how you felt?
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. And it was fun because um, you know I had to figure out how to tell engaging stories. And there's a problem
Mhm.
with, or there used to be a problem with the word documentary. It was a dirty word. People would think like documentary, oh, interviews, boring. You take a
Mm.
look at Netflix now and the number of documentaries there, and they are
Oh,
so
yeah,
interesting, so engaging.
yeah.
So it was interesting. Now that changed because then they started turning around and saying like, oh, can you do a video, for human resources? We want to attract scientists from Europe or whatever. So then I started making videos showing the dorms and the facilities, and we have a squash court. And then I thought, no, I might as well do wedding videos. They're more interesting. I don't want to do this,
Mm.
you know. So I decided to go back to longer form documentary, and a very interesting project landed on my lap. Um, and I tried to turn it down. And sometimes when you try to turn something down really hard and people are persistent, you really have to look again and say, okay, there might
Maybe
be
there's a
something here.
reason. Yeah. It's kind of like, again, back to those, what you're talking about, the sliding the walking in the hallways kind of and the different doors, and at some point we do have to kind of check in with ourselves. Are these opportunities coming up to us for a reason? And reevaluate the right and think if there's going to be a moment in which we're just going to pass it, or if we're going to open that door or not, because if not, it's going to probably come up later on, maybe not. So um that's
Yeah.
awesome that you took, so you did take it, and then
It was a very interesting collaboration with a Canadian um, filmmaker director, Anjali Nayar. And we started this documentary. Well, she had been working on it, and she was looking for funding. And she told me the story was about cattle rustlers or cattle thieves here in Kenya. There, there's two
mm,
tribes that fight amongst each other with AK-47s, so they're armed and they shoot each other for their cattle, and they just steal
wow.
it back and forth. And this is in the northern part of Kenya, which is like bandit territory. And and she said, "Oh, it's about cattle rustlers leaving their guns behind to run marathons." And I was like, "What? I, I've got to do this project." I mean, I just thought it was the most incredible project. I hadn't, everyone talks about marathon runners in Kenya. Everyone's made a documentary about Kenyan marathon runners.
Mhm.
And I've seen so many, and they're all the same. It's about the runner, and that's it. But this was not about marathon runners. It had the marathon there, but it was about life choices, and it was about
Mm.
friendship, and it was about like the realities of Kenya. So we worked on that project for 6 years, and we started another one in Liberia at the same time, which also took 6 or 7 years, and we started another one at the same time, which we're still filming. So that's been now 10 years or 11 years, um, and so I just shifted everything. I totally dropped the research institutes, and I started doing documentary, and I started doing then advertising. I decided to invest in um, a very professional equipment. And then my wife turns around and says, we're getting kicked out of our house because they're selling the
Oh.
plot. So, one of the amazing things about living in Nairobi or in Kenya is that you can live in big places. But if you don't own the plot, it's expensive. It has become really expensive.
Mm.
So, like my neighbor's house goes for $5,000 a month, and this is in a third world country.
Wow.
So she said, let's buy land. And I was like, I've been saving for 8 years for my gear. I was like, okay, well, yeah, let's buy land. And we bought an acre, and we got a mortgage, and we got a mortgage for 5 years. Uh, they only gave us a mortgage for 5 years, $150,000, um, with a 20% interest in Kenya.
Oh.
So then those 5 years were really hard. And for me, it felt like going back to square one when I
Mm.
was teaching English and trying to be a filmmaker. Then all of a sudden, here I am, full fledged filmmaker, but really struggling. And struggling because I, I did have very good projects. I worked for the UN, making films. I worked in advertising, and I had some steady clients. But then this is when financial markets were plummeting, um, and
Had your
and
daughter been born yet at that moment?
yes, yeah,
She had. Okay.
yeah, she was 2 years old,
Okay.
and my son. Oh, parentheses. My son came to live with me a year and a half after I had been here in Kenya.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so my son has grown up in Kenya. It originally was intended for a year, and then he stayed on, and he's still here
That's
thanks to COVID, even though he graduated from school last year. So, um, we I looked at the numbers and said, okay, it's hard paying $150,000 in 5 years, but we can make it. What I didn't count with is some of my clients not settling their bills up to a year and a half later. And
mm,
so I went back to, I would no longer drive my car. I would save fuel and I would go down on the bike with the bike to the shops and buy milk and whatever. We stopped going out for dinner with friends. We stopped socializing. A lot of people stopped inviting us because they're like, oh, yeah, um, they can't come out, you know. So it was really hard. And I was working, I was working Saturdays, Sundays. There were months in which I would be working 20, 22 hours a day. Um, I had the stamina to sleep 2 hours a day, and I would sleep whenever I was tired. Like, oh, now I need to sleep for 2 hours. Um, and then I absolutely hated that life, and I absolutely hated a plot and owing money and working just for that purpose. And I felt I had no life. Uh, I think that was like the hardest thing ever. And then come Christmas, I think 5 years ago, um, we are at friends that we're with. No, well, sorry, we wake up to the 25th, which is when we give gifts here, and we had said no gifts for us, just the kids. Well, my wife had some gifts for me, like really silly things and a beautiful card. I didn't even have a card for my wife. I didn't even, like wrap a spoon and say Happy Christmas, anything. And it was so hard for her. It broke her,
oh, oh,
because
man.
she thought like, like, wow. and uh,
Wow.
and that really made me think.
Mm,
I apologized profusely. I said, I don't know, like this, the whole situation had taken over my life. Like I was
mm.
absolutely absorbed by
With stress and
by the
work and
financial burden.
yes.
And then at the same time, a lot of the big projects I had were pulled off at the very last minute. And so to
Mm,
make money, I would go and be camera assistant. So it's like I would give, the cameraman their lenses in an advertising shoot, and people that were way younger than me. And I thought, like it's fine. Uh, like I'm fine with my ego. I can work as a camera assistant, as a focus puller. I can be an assistant. It doesn't matter. I just need to pay my debts. But I was not happy. I was like, well, this is not what I had planned. um,
mm,
and then, so that all made me think. And that night, I was very down, and I was watching stuff, and I came across transcendental meditation. Um, and I came across this filmmaker, David Lynch, who is a big proponent of transcendental meditation, which is basically you
mhm,
have 20 minutes, and it's kind of like a power nap where you focus. And it's a power nap because you start meditating, but in that meditation you go into a deep sleep, and then you wake up and you're absolutely re-energized. So I started doing that, and I started thinking a lot about what do I want to do, um, because at the same time I realized that once again there I was working for someone else's dreams. So
mm,
all these projects, all these documentaries, absolutely adverts and musical videos, they're not for me. They're for someone else. And I love these collaborations, right? But I felt a void because it's like I'm doing everything, like I'm building this house. It's it's for me, but it's for my kids. And
Mhm.
I'm working on all these projects, and I've won awards and I've been nominated, but it's not, it doesn't come out from me.
Hmm.
Um, so
So
yeah,
with this, with doing then transcendental meditation, was this the first time that you felt you were again just feeding then some feeding your own being in that moment? Like it was it something to just kind of help you recenter and refocus?
yes. So it's funny because I always look for something. I'm always in search of something, like. So when I was in uni and I was
We
teaching
should
English,
always be searching.
yeah.
That's the
So
thing. We should always be.
so like I've and I my father has suffers from depression, and it's been handed down to me. It's a
Mhm.
biochemical thing, and I can very easily get depressed. I mean, just today I was depressed in the morning. But so when I was in uni and I felt very lost because I was working as an English teacher, and I was, not happy with the university. I took 3 months off while I was doing my thesis, and I went looking for a martial art, and I found Aikido. So I went to different dojos like gyms. So
Mhm.
karate, and it's like, oh, can I watch? Yeah, this is how we kick the shit out of someone, and they just punch
Mhm.
someone. And then taekwondo, yeah, this is how we fly in the air and kick this guy's face. And I was like, oh my god, like it was not what I was looking for. And I find Aikido, which is this martial art, which is like it works on the spiral. So someone attacks you and you throw their attack back, and it's like life. What goes around comes around, basically.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah,
it was.
like reflect what is it? Like blocking it so that it deflects it? Deflects
It's not.
the is that
It's not. It's not even blocking, but it works like a spiral. So when someone comes
mm,
to hold you, you move them around and they fly off. Anyway,
mm,
it's a beautiful martial art, and it was more of a spiritual thing. And sometimes we would get to the door and then walk away because I was not afraid of the exercise. I was afraid of confronting my ego.
mm.
And every time
Wow.
my sensei would say like, she was French, she would say like, Joan, you are falling hard because you're fighting your ego. I was like, okay,
Mm,
what does that mean?
mm,
So transcendental meditation again was one of these things in life, um, where I found another way of looking at myself, and thinking about my goals and thinking about life, and helping me see hard times through. Um, and then we finished paying the mortgage, by accident. I got a call from the bank. They said, on a Friday, if you don't pay today, Monday, it's going to the lawyers, for, the start for repossession. And I owed the bank $3,000 out of 150, out of 210,000 with
yeah,
interest
because
rate.
of the 20%. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That was
And
a
uh,
big
and I was like, what the hell? So I just called a friend, and he he lent. Well, actually, he paid me a job that we were on at the moment. I said, can you pay the job right now? And I went to the forex, changed the dollars into shillings, went to the bank 5 minutes before they closed. I paid, and then I turn around and I say, okay, can you look in the system and tell me how much more money I owe you? And
mm.
they look and they said, oh no, you've just finished. And I thought,
Ah,
oh,
so rough.
I thought we had another 3 months to go, because I was so behind my payments. I was like 2 months, 3 months behind all the time. Anyway, so all of a sudden, and it's my daughter's birthday. So it's actually her birthday is on the, um, April 21st, but we celebrated on the 13th, and it was Friday the 13th, and I'm lost, and I'm like, I can't believe, and my wife is like, I can't believe we have just finished paying the loan. I didn't even know what to feel. I was numb, and I was still working. So we had my daughter's birthday. Like friends came, and I said, her little friends came, and I said, okay, I'll take some time off, and then I'll come back to the office at 2 in the morning. So I went back to the office at 2 in the morning, and I was working. And then at 6, I go out for a cup of coffee. So my office is in my garden, which is the lucky thing. So I decide I'll go to the house, get a cup of coffee, and I stand in the middle of the plot, and I'm looking, and it's a miserable morning, but I love those miserable blue mornings, and I just cried for 2 hours nonstop
Mm.
because just before during that, I was chatting with a friend, with, one of our classmates, Sebastian Palau, and he's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, let's go to Japan, blah blah blah." And I said, "Yeah, let's plan for Japan, but let's do it next year." And then I realized, like, oh, I could dream again. So I had withheld
Mm.
my dreams during that period because there was no way I could, you know, do any of these dreams when I had this financial pressure. And so I
Oh.
decided I wouldn't let that happen again, you know, because it's too much of a sacrifice. And I think
So you wouldn't let basically financial blockages like that be things that would block you from being able to dream. Yes?
yes, try not to get involved in anything that where you sacrifice. You have to
Mhm.
sacrifice everything. I think like you have to sacrifice things in life, um, but but not so much.
Mhm. Oh, wow. So yeah, there's been quite a bit of those moments then for you in your life, different junctures, like you said. You were talking about luck and magic, and those junctures, like that luck is kind of when the opportunity and the preparation meet. But then also in life, there's just been a lot of other different kind of junctures that have been life awakening and changing for you. Now, let's talk a little bit about how now during COVID, as a filmmaker, what has been your purpose, and talk a little bit about these vignettes that you've been doing, which was actually what prompted me to contact you and see if you wanted to hop on, because I loved what you were doing with your journal vignettes. So would you mind sharing that, and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah. So look, just very quickly. So my son is very intelligent, and but he's got very emotional understanding and social skills. He's kind of like almost Asperger's,
Hmm.
and he's a lovely kid. And throughout the years, we've given him tools with the help of therapists to help him cope and understand more about the emotional side and social side. Anyway, we found, and we talk about this lunch time, dinner time, with the family at times. And my daughter, she is uh, very emotionally intelligent, and she tells me, my wife brings this up like, oh, there is this thing, IQ, EQ, SQ, AQ. So you have the intelligence coefficient, emotional quotient, sorry, social
Mm.
quotient, and adversity quotient. And
Ooh.
Lola says, Jam Blue, if you give me some of your IQ, I'll give you some of my EQ, SQ, because you don't have any. And
And she's so much younger. She's how many years younger than he is with her?
she's
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 just
11.
she's
She's 11,
spunky.
so
She's
7 years.
spunky. I like
Yeah.
like
And
that.
one of the things that like our marriage could have fallen apart for these 5 years paying the mortgage because it was under such stress. You
Hmm.
know, luckily my wife is very resilient as well. And then talking when we heard about this AQ, adversity quotient,
I
we
love that. Yeah.
it it was like, like it's so true because we could have sold the plot or half of the plot, and she would just turn around and say, "It's just 2 more years," and I'm like, "Do you know how many days that is?" But we made it through, and so um, I feel that some people have a huge adversity quotient, right? Like a lot
Mm.
of people that make it in life have gone through terrible hardships, and but that's that AQ.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that would be the resilience. That's the resilience component. So AQ, in other words,
resilience.
resilience. Yeah,
Yeah,
resilience. Yeah.
resilience. So,
Mm.
well, luckily, okay, during COVID, So, funny thing is, the minute I finished paying the mortgage, then uh, all the jobs I've had, they haven't been canceled. Like whatever happened, it was a bad streak or it was fate. But then I've been on so many projects, and then my name started going out more out there, and so I've always been busy, but now I've been busy with more international clients, which pay so much better. And I got on a long term project. I mean, this is the I started in 2018, doing a history series here in the bush, which is where I'm actually right now. It's the biggest.
And the bush is what? The bush is just the outskirt. What does the bush consider
No,
if you
this is
for us?
the, okay. The
What is
bush
the
in
bush?
Kenya. The bush in
Yes,
Kenya
please.
is where you will find lions, elephants, and
Okay.
wildlife.
So the bush is like what
Uh,
what like in Colombia would be like the jungle. Like what the bush is that's considered what yes?
yeah,
Is that right?
yeah,
Out, yeah.
yes,
Okay. Nature. Being out in the woods kind of thing in the nature. Okay. Not
yeah.
in the
Be
woods,
it
but in the plains in
national
in
park,
the
or reserves, or like there are
yes.
places where you have wild animals, and it's not
Okay.
a park or a reserve. It's just like that.
Thank you. Thank you for
So I'm in the.
feeding my IQ. Thank you for feeding my IQ.
You're welcome. So this is the largest national park. It's huge, and I'm working with a filmmaker who's 82 years old, and he's lived in this park since the 1969. He's filmed the poaching that's happened here. He was
Mm,
second unit director of Out of Africa. He's worked with Clint
wow.
Eastwood. He's worked with Steven Spielberg, uh, big names.
Mhm,
And but he always was interested in making his wildlife stories. So he's like,
mhm,
"Oh, I worked in Out of Africa, so I could get money to make my film about the honey badger." Um,
mhm,
so I've had a very consistent job, but it's been quite demanding. Um, and then I've got some clients in South Africa, and I'm doing advertising for them, where I produce everything, and then we shoot it here and we edit it, and then other people approaching me. So, for example, last year with COVID, there was a high demand for cameramen here in Kenya from overseas, because generally speaking, you would have the BBC, Planet Earth, you would have now Netflix,
mhm,
Nat Geo sending their own crews. But with lockdown and all planes on the ground, they had to use local cameramen. So we're some um, expat cameramen here in Kenya, um, and we got calls. Can you go and film this? Can you go and film that? So last year was not a bad year for us. It was actually, there was even more work because of COVID. Um, but then it got me thinking again about this whole thing of me working for other people's dreams. And one of the things I had been moaning about in the past years, inclusively when paying the mortgages, that I was not exercising my own creativity. Again, I'm working for someone else. And so this project is an amazing project, but it's for someone else. Of
mhm,
course, there's always something of you in there, but I'm following someone else's instructions. And I can
mhm,
exercise my creativity, but it's not the same. It's not my things. So I've been putting off writing my own film. You know, I've been putting off doing my own thing, and and a friend of mine did a video diary. He's a film director who works with me here in Nairobi, and he did a film diary last year. He made a film per day, and and he kept saying, "Why don't you do one? Why don't you just do one?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm too busy." And then I thought, I'm always busy, and I will always be busy. You
right.
know, like
Yeah.
that's not
It's
going to
such a
change.
cheap excuse, isn't it? Yeah, it's such a cheap excuse to put off our dreams. It's always the "I'm busy," right? It's like one of these like um kind of I don't know, what do we say? Like automatic pilot responses that we do and we end up, using it all the time to put off what we really truly are desiring to do. So okay, so you make the
Well,
realization, you're like, I'm always
it's
busy,
funny.
so then
It's funny because a lot of people, uh, you know, friends and other people that I've spoken to about my life were asking me, "How did you end up here?" Everyone asks me, "How did you do it?" And I said, "I just did it. I just
Mhm.
plunged myself out of my comfort zone and said, let's go to Kenya." And so then I keep having this same conversation, and they say, some people have come to me and it's like, "Oh, I'm so fed up with my job. I hate it. And then I met this guy in Paris when I was doing this master's degree, and this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I just don't know what to do." I said, "Well, follow your dream. Just, leave your job." "No, but getting a job is so hard in Colombia." You just said you hated it, you know. So like,
Mhm.
and it's fear. So I realized it's fear.
Mm.
We live with fears, irrational fears. So actually, putting something off, like me putting off writing my film, is the fear of failure. But you only
Yes.
grow when you fail, and that's the
Mhm.
thing. And and so what I decided with this diary is, okay, let's just do it. I started as a fun thing. January 1st, I filmed my house like January 1st, nothing is happening. And then the kids, they're running and playing with the dogs. And then I thought, like, oh, how do we make this more interesting? Or just have a shot of all the cake we've eaten and then put it there before the kids, you hear this screaming and they're
Wake up.
running. And that's like Sugar Rush. Yes. And then the
Yes.
second day, I did another film. I saw my daughter doing the dishes, and I thought, she's always doing her dishes with her headphones. And I said, I'm going to turn you into a rock star, because she's been saying, I want to be in America's Got Talent. So I said, okay, you're going to be in Nairobi's Got Talent. I'm going to make you a rock star. And then it turned into this thing. And I said, okay, I'm doing this. I'm doing a film per day. And because it's been so much fun, so challenging. And then I realized, that fear, I'm killing it, which is the fear of failure. I don't care if
Mhm.
like every day I do a little film, it's for myself and other people watch it. But if it's not great, so what? But I did something that very few people do, right? Which is, I'm doing a little film per day. So it's my own thing.
Mhm.
And it's been amazing because um, I've had this surge of creativity. I just look around and I start seeing stories coming out. Um,
Mm.
and they can
Which
be
I love.
very
Which I love.
experimental or very straightforward, or but it's this thing about looking at your own life, and it's a diary. It is a diary.
Mm.
but but then there's so many things I'm learning, right? I can, you know I can have the discipline. I'm very disciplined working for other people. I've never been disciplined with my own work. So now I'm like, I could do 2 or 3 hours a day, my own thing. So I could write a script when I'm done with this, and
Mhm.
just say, okay, it'll take a year, but I'll do it every day. I'll put the time.
So has it was it January 1st of this year that you started? No, January
Yeah,
1st of
yeah. No,
this
no,
year.
no.
Okay, so
This
what
year, this
this
year.
year.
It's
Okay, this year. So it just started right now. Yeah, and they're quite intriguing, and you were talking about like the little things and nuances, and the I was texting you saying how the one about the closing of drawers and stuff like that, how it relates to some things in my home, like anytime my husband sees a drawer that's open, like closing it. So it's like really simple, yet like in just a few minutes, um, does
it's
tell a
just a
story. The one of
minute.
the
I gave
a
myself the
minute?
challenge.
It's a
Yes.
minute? Oh
Yeah, I
my
gave
gosh, it's
myself the
only and
challenge. They're only a minute long.
and yet there's a story in just that minute, and it makes us wonder just in life, really, like you just said, there is a story even in the what is it called, the maybe monotony in somebody's day, that they may think that the day looks the same as yesterday, like you mentioned before, groundhog day type of thing, um yet it isn't. there is always some nuance that is different, some nuances, and that's what you're capturing in your little vignettes. And so, I really do invite people to go check them out. And I'll definitely, if you allow me to share that link, then
Absolutely.
in the show notes, so that people can go click and view these, because they're so entertaining and also thought provoking as well too. And also the fact that you are out there in the bush filming also animals and stuff too. The Was it a stampede? You have a stampede, right? uh did you do the stampede? I know you have one of the flock of birds.
I
um
don't have a
I have
stampede yet, unless I
You haven't
forgot
established.
to
Okay.
write.
Okay, but you do have a flock of birds. So, okay, so there's different,
Yeah,
things like that. So,
yeah.
anyway, so I invite everybody to see. Any closing words, John? And I'm just so grateful again for you coming on and again showing us really that even though fear might hold us back from stepping into something new, it's in that stepping out of our comfort zone, and knowing that yes, there can be fear associated with some of these steps, fear in going to a new country, but yet there's a world of possibilities of what can come. Is there something else you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, like the thing about it sounds so simple, uh, stepping out of your comfort zone, right? It's like telling someone when they're angry, don't be angry, or when they're sad, don't be
Mm-hmm.
sad. It's cheap. It's so easy
Mm-hmm.
to say that, and it's not easy stepping out of your comfort zone, and it gets harder because as you step out of your comfort zone gets bigger, and it gets bigger and it gets bigger, and then the fears can become bigger. So at the end of the day, it's all about fighting your own fears. It's about finding the irrationality of these fears, um, and also, you know not ever stopping dreaming. I have to say that, like, I took a life insurance a couple of years ago, and I've thought, it's funny because I thought all the time, well, if I die today, I mean, it will be, of course, very sad. But in terms of my own life, I have outlived the dreams I had when I was a kid,
Mm.
and which I don't know if, like, growing as I did, like, for me, those dreams were big. And I'm not talking about, like, I want to be president of the United States. I mean, talk about that dream. But about your personal dreams, and I've surpassed my personal dreams, because it has been a very different life than what I had expected, and I've achieved more. Like, I never expected to have my own house. At the age of 42, my property and no debts. Um, but then your dreams change, and now doing these little short films, I'm like, okay, yes, I if I die, I've had a life that I never expected. But now I'm thinking, like, oh, wait a minute, I cannot die. There's still so much more to do,
Mm.
because I have found a renewed source of energy. Physically, I'm exhausted because it's quite demanding, and I don't have the stamina I used to have. But, like, my mind, I'm just, it's surging. And so, yeah, it's very important to, no matter what, always try to break the pattern, and do something a bit different, and do something for yourself. We don't
And
do enough
yeah.
for ourselves.
And I think that in that aspect of tapping into our creativity and doing something for ourselves is where you feel energized. That's why you feel that renewed sense of energy, even if you're physically exhausted, because you're doing something that is fulfilling your dreams. Right? Like you feel like, okay, I just came back from filming, but I'm gonna do I'm gonna finish my own little vignette of my own short movie today,
Exactly.
right? So there's a sense of purpose. And like you said before, there is definitely a difference. And I learned something from you. I tend to be that type of person that when it's doing something in a group environment that others depend on my work, I am very committed. I'm very committed and I will do it. And it's very few things that I feel that I do because it's mine. And actually, this podcast has shown, and now I'm going to get emotional. Okay. Now, as I'm saying it, this podcast, creating this podcast almost a year ago, has shown me that I am actually capable of doing something, and it is really just based on my own doings and following through, and that it's not because somebody else depends on me putting it out there, but it's because of something I I'm doing. So,
And that's
it,
wonderful. And I relate to that because look, every day I get messages from different people, and my doctor, we call Dr. Gandhi, he's very very old. He sent me a message this morning, and I send him the videos every day on WhatsApp. I asked him
Mhm.
like, "Are you happy to get this?" And you don't have to reply ever. He said, "Yeah, send them." And he's
Mhm.
not said anything. And he wrote this morning, "Thank you very much, Joanne. I watch your posted clips every day. Your eye for
Mm,
details, artistry, sound effects are all very captivating. I am beginning to see a side of you that I was aware of all this time, but not in such details. Please keep sending the clips every day." And
mm.
and I had
Oh,
tears in my eye
wonderful.
because
I got chills. Yeah.
I
Somebody
was
that's
like,
known you for so long, yet that he's seeing something completely new in you. That's that,
exactly.
right? Oh,
And that's one of the
wonderful.
things I felt like, um, one of the things that I'm getting out of this is that people are getting to know me better. People are
Mm,
getting to understand, like, I'm the I have friends that say, Colombiano. They see me and they just stereotype me.
mm,
And people, like in the media, is like, oh yeah, he's a oh, you need an interview, he's a documentary filmmaker. And I'm like, I don't do
mm, mm,
interviews. I make films. And so
mhm.
this, now people are going like, oh, okay, this is what you do, and understand a little bit more about where I come from.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah,
But
your
your
storytelling about
podcast,
your own life.
it's funny because I looked at your podcast and I thought, this is Kendra doing this podcast for herself. And I
Mm,
was looking and I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. And it is pretty cool, you know?
thank you. Well, I'm glad that you're a part of it. Thank you for coming into my little world here, into my little bubble of the podcast, and sharing your story. And to everybody else that listened today, I hope that you took as many nuggets as I did in this conversation. So thank you once again. And with our time difference, I'm so glad we were able to still be able to manage it, having it
Well,
having it done. So
this is when I edit. I'm gonna get off and start editing my
and then
little
start working
my little
on your
video.
short film. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Gracias, amiguillo.
right. Gracias a ti.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.